Hello and welcome back. I'm so excited to be here to moderate the final session. My name is June Sarpong, and we are joined by two extraordinary guests for this final session. We have with us the esteemed UN Special Envoy for Global Education and, of course, former British Prime Minister Gordon Brown. And also joining him for this discussion is the Executive Director of UNICEF, Henrietta Fore. Hello to you both. How are you keeping? Where are you both in the world right now?
I think Henrietta's in New York, and I'm in just outside Edinburgh in Fife. And we've got one of our good days. It's not raining, it's not too windy. So I hope you can see some of the view.
We can indeed. Well, thank you so much for joining us, both of you. It has been one full-on year, to say the least. And of course, many of the issues that impact the SDGs perhaps are even more pronounced because of everything that we are going through. And it'd be wonderful to hear your insights in relation to what the world needs to do in order to achieve SDG 4. And of course, what you're both doing in order to lead some of these efforts. So if I may, Gordon, I'd like to start with you. And my first question is, of course, every time that we see you, somehow you manage to remain upbeat and encouraging when it comes to education and how we can solve some of the global education crisis. What keeps you hopeful, even through some of these dark times?
Well, today's sessions, I've been following them through this day, and some of the great interventions made by so many people, ministers, business leaders, and young people with their faith in the future. It makes me believe we can do something very big in the next few years. You know, education, as Henrietta will emphasize, because she is going to talk about early childhood education and the role that business can play. But education is the greatest gift of all. It's irreplaceable. It's something that if you can get the benefit, you never look back. And that's why we've got to remember throughout this crisis that yes, we've got an economic crisis, and yes, we've got a health crisis, but it has become an education crisis. So many children not at school, so many children not able to get an education online because they're not linked up. So many denied school meals because school was the way they got their school meals. And of course, education budgets being cut. This is what worries me, about 150 billion being cut out of education budgets next year because the priorities of countries have had to be about health and social safety nets. So what do?
Yes.
We've got to press every government to maintain their education budget. The youth ambassadors, their world, everybody here can actually do that. And I know UNICEF is very keen to do that too. We've got to spend some money on digital so that we can link children up, so that if there's any more lockdowns, we can have children benefiting who don't benefit more from school. The schools we return to have got to be safe. So we've got to bring back better. We must have safe schools for children around the world. And that includes a nursery and preschool education, as well as secondary and primary education. And then we've got to release the resources, not just for the digital and not just for, if you like, better teaching opportunities, but we've got to get more money so that we can meet the Sustainable Development Goal. You know, we've still got 260 million children not going to school. We've still got 400 million children who leave school forever at the age of 11 or 12. And we've got 800 million children who are not really reading or writing at the age of 11 and will leave education with no qualifications whatsoever. So we have got a crisis even before this COVID crisis, and we've got to address it. And that's why I want to generate more resources for education. And maybe we can come back to that. Some debt relief for countries, some help with special drawing rights, an international issue of currency, and so on. Let's come back to that later. But there are things that we can do. But don't ever forget, education is how we bridge the gap between what we are and what we have it in ourselves to become. It's about realizing talent and potential. And our children are more talented than the underfunded and pre-digital schools that we've condemned them to. We have got to do better.
Thank you so much for that, Gordon. If I may come to you, Henrietta, of course, we heard earlier, and Gordon just touched on the importance of early childhood education and to making sure that every child gets the best possible start in life. So UNICEF took the 10% pledge to dedicate a larger portion of its funding to early years. How are you going to encourage the business community to do the same?
Well, June, you and Gordon have just made the case. So we really need to make sure that we remember the youngest citizens. And sometimes when you look back at your own education, you think about the teachers you had in primary school or secondary school or at university, and you forget that there was a whole time period in your life where you were learning quickly and you were under the age of 6. And it's a very, very important time of life. It's when you get the stimulation and the education from your parents. It's where you begin to form your words. It's where you get good nutrition so that your brain forms well. But we know the answers to this age group. And what happens is we forget it as we grow older. So we really want to sound the call that every corporation, every foundation, every government should be re-looking at their budgets and making sure that there is early childhood education of 1 year for every child in this world so that they are ready to learn by the time they're 5.
Yes.
If they're ready to learn by the time they're 5, then they can make it to 10 where there will be a quality education and they can read and understand a paragraph. And by the time they're 18, to also know some skills that can lead to livelihoods for the rest of their lives. But we've got to get them ready to learn, June.
And it's crucial that we do ensure that we are there at that point in a child's development. Can you just touch on a little bit more in terms of how you will convince businesses that this is where they also need to invest?
Well, businesses are wonderful partners for all of us. And sometimes we do not remember that they speak a different language, they're moving at a different pace, and they have different budgetary constraints and opportunities. But if we can get that syncing right, sort of like dancing together, if you can get it right, it means that you've got synergy. So for corporations, we want to make the case, and most of them in their own personal lives know it, that getting a good start in life leads to quality, and we know how to do this. So we have proven solutions. They can help with nutrition and technology and many of the things that Gordon was talking about. Businesses can be our partners to do this. So quality, universality, because we're going to have to do this in high-tech neighborhoods, and we're going to have to do it in low-tech neighborhoods and in no-tech neighborhoods.
Yeah.
But business can help us on all of those. We need to be sure that we are working together so that we are creating one unified package for government, business, and nonprofits and multilaterals. It's very important that we come together as one, because as Gordon said, we're letting young people down. We're not giving them yet all the tools they need to make it their world. And we want to make it their world.
Indeed. We like their world, don't we, Gordon? If I could bring you in here.
Just to add to what, nobody's done more, than Henrietta to bring business into helping with education. She's recruited the head of Microsoft, the head of Unilever, some of the biggest companies in the world for Generation Unlimited.
Wow.
She's launched a digital marketplace where we're actually trying to get companies to invest in helping us go online for so many children that are denied the internet. And she's going to be pressing the G20 with all our help so that the G20 group of governments can put more up to digital online education and therefore open up the chance of learning to millions who don't have it. But I think we've learned from climate change, and many of their world ambassadors and others listening to this will know that businesses are now disclosing far more of what they do. And so we know what impact they're making on the environment. And they're drawing up transition plans to move from an unsustainable economy to a sustainable economy.
Yeah.
We need the same. We need disclosure. What are you doing for education and training? And then we need to ask, what are you doing for the transition? The transition is, if you like, from countries that are not educating their children to what you would do to help us train a new generation of young people for the jobs of tomorrow. So businesses can play a really big part. And I think Henrietta is the person that's going to lead us in that direction.
Thank you. Well, Henrietta, you were being far too modest there. And Gordon has filled us in on the wonderful work that you've been doing. Gordon, if I could come to you and talk about nations. at a time when so many countries around the world are now looking inwards and actually looking at what they can do for their own countries as opposed to the sort of global perspective that I know that you have been a champion of. As somebody that has been or was the longest serving finance minister, as well as obviously being prime minister, what are you saying to other world leaders and other finance ministers to help them unlock this big change and understand why it's actually crucial that they invest here?
Well, some of us brought together 230 past leaders, past prime ministers, past presidents, leading educationalists, leading economists, and we sent a letter a few weeks ago to the G20, which is on the website for people who want to see. And we were saying, if you are short-sighted and don't see the future, then you may be tempted to say, let's forget about education for the time being. We've got a health crisis. But if you're being long-term and thinking about your country's need to grow again, and your countries need to develop the talents of its people, then you'll invest in education. And what we were suggesting was the world comes together. We use the money that is available from debt relief, which can be done, about 80 billion of debt relief, and say, look, we will give countries debt relief, but spend the money on health and education.
Yes.
There's a new international currency called these special drawing rights. Now that could be $1.2 trillion over the next 2 or 3 years. That is there for countries to draw on, particularly for investment in the future, like in education. And so there are various ways that if the world came together, we could vote together, countries together in the G20 and the IMF and the World Bank, and say, look, we can put more resources to you, but you've got to spend it on the future. You've got to spend it on investing in people. You've got to spend it on the young generation, which is the key to the future of your country. And I believe that that can be done. And we're trying to build a global opinion that says we cannot afford not to act in developing our education.
Brilliant. So Henrietta, can you tell me a bit more about the ambition from Generation Unlimited? You touched on it slightly. Can we go into that in even more detail?
Yes, and may I just pick up on Gordon? It's the best investment any one of us can make. And when you realize that as a country or as an individual, you then say to yourself, well, so how should I do that? So what we have put together is a couple of plans. They're all public and private, but we want to connect every school in the world to the internet. We can now do this because we have a world in which there is excellent technology from low Earth satellites, from fiber optic cables, from Wi-Fi. So we could connect every school to the internet. And then we need to connect every learner and every teacher to the internet. So we have begun gathering ICT companies who can give 0 rating, thus it's affordable. You can download for free your lesson plans from your national education system. We've just done this in one very interesting public-private partnership called the Learning Passport, which is with the University of Cambridge and Microsoft. And it is that you can download in your own language your national education plan. So if you're a refugee or a child on the move, you have access. You don't have to leave your learning behind. You can stay up with your classes. So there are many of these types of initiatives that can move a young person's life and change it so that you carry your education with you. What Gordon was saying earlier, education is portable. You carry it in your head. No one can take it from you.
No one can take it away, yeah.
It's very important whether you're a refugee or an IDP or in a conflict situation, or you're just at home in lockdown during the time of COVID. So our goal is to make sure that there is an excellent library of learning that young people can access. They want to have more direction for their own lives. So they want to learn occupational skills. They want to know how to put up a solar panel, or how to become a teacher or a nurse or a doctor, or how to repair a motorcycle. And they can do this now online, which is why these hybrid solutions are very important. So if you're a finance minister and you are listening to Gordon Brown, you put your money into investing into good IT system for your school. You put money into your education system for your teachers. You ask all of your corporations to try to give you mobile devices. So there are tablets in the classroom. So there's good online learning for everyone in your country. And it can change the world. So we are hoping as a team to bring this through the world and let it ripple through and let everyone see that the best investment is in children's education.
Without question, without question. And on that note, Gordon, we know that education is the most effective tool for social mobility. So really, this argument should be done. It should be over. Why are we still having to make the case for this?
Because I think people became a bit complacent 10 years ago, 20 years ago about what had been achieved in education, because large numbers of young children had got to primary school. There was a huge increase in the numbers who were attending school. But then suddenly it stalled, partly because of the global financial crisis, and then partly because there was austerity and budgets were being held back. I think now people do understand education is the best route out of poverty for any child in the world. Education is the gift that keeps on giving, because once you have these skills, you can use them, as Henrietta has said, everywhere. But we have got to be imaginative about how we finance education when there are limited resources around the world. And that's why we've not only got the proposal for using debt relief for education, but we've also got this proposal that Henrietta and I have talked about a bit for the International Finance Facility for Education. We want the World Bank to increase the amount of resources going to poor countries. And for the low and middle income countries, we want to give them the chance to get more resources by creating this special facility. And if the young people watching this event today, and I've been following the enthusiasm, but also the questions that young people have about what we can actually do and why we cannot be complacent about education, then let's pressure the government so that we can create these new facilities and make them work for education. Because if we can create the International Finance Facility for Education, if a government puts up $100 million, it could mean $400 million spent on education. That's the way it works. We multiply the resources that are available, and therefore we can get to more children and more people. And when you know there's this huge gap of funding that we've got to fill if we're going to reach that sustainable development goal, remember, we want to be the first generation in history where every single child has the chance to go to school. We want to develop not just some of the talents of some of our young people, but we want to develop all of the talents of all of our young people. And so we need to keep up the pressure that not only have we got to increase standards and improve the quality of education, but we've got to make sure that this investment is properly financed, not just by the governments of the day, but obviously by everybody, foundations, businesses, everybody who's prepared to contribute to the development of preschool, primary, secondary, and further education.
Thank you. Henrietta, is that goal achievable? Is it something she can do?
Yes, you wouldn't have thought so, but with today's technology, it is now achievable. I mean, we could, in the next 4 to 5 years, connect every school to the internet. We could connect every learner and every teacher to the internet. We're going to have a lot of training to do, but if we set on this as a world, we can do this. There is enough funding. It's how it's allocated, as Gordon says. And we just have not been putting enough priority on education, but it would be the greatest equalizer. It would allow the haves and the have-nots to have a chance to be on the same field. Half the world does not have connectivity, and a lot of them are girls, June, but we could change that. So we are hoping that we could reach every child in the world by the year 2030. We are hoping for 500 million. We are now upping that to 600 million in the next 2 years. So we think we can reach them. So please come join us, everyone.
Please come join us. And I think in addition to it being the great equalizer, it's also the great unifier in how we connect the next generation. Education has such an important role to play with that. And if we're using some of the stuff that you've been describing in terms of the connectivity element, imagine if we also connect those children together, what that would mean for international relations.
Yeah. And that's what our global youth ambassadors at their world are all about. And that's what UNICEF, with its program of linking children in every part of the world. And, never stop believing that we can actually change things for the better. We fixed the ozone layer.
Yes.
Eliminated smallpox. We've virtually eliminated polio.
Yeah.
We have dealt with some of the tragic fallout from HIV/AIDS.
We're on our way with malaria.
Yes, there are things that we can do if we make up our mind to do it together. And when the world unites around a common objective, it can do things. And of course, getting every child into quality education in school is one of these objectives that no parent I know would ever disagree with. They would never deny the chance of education to other children and say it should just be their own. They would always want to say every single child should have the chance of education. So we're knocking on an open door with public opinion, but we've got to go through that door by creating the resources that are necessary and the momentum. And what I found out of this conference today, which has been an excellent conference with so many different people speaking with so many great voices, is there is this unity, there is this common desire, there is this coming together and saying, let's now do it. We bring back better, we build for the future in a more determined way. We don't allow this crisis to become the education crisis where so many millions of children continue to lose out. We get them into school, we get them into learning, and we use all the resources of the digital age to make that possible, as Henrietta has said, for so many children who've been denied it so far.
Brilliant. Well, thank you both so much, Henrietta and Gordon. It's been an absolute honor and a pleasure speaking to you. I honestly can't thank you enough for the phenomenal work that you're both doing in this area. So that's all for this session. If you'd like to know more, please visit theirworld.org. There you'll be able to find all the information that you need in terms of how you can join the campaign and move this agenda forward. And also, in addition to that, if you'd like to add your name to our letter to 10 world leaders, you can find more information for that also on their world. I'd now like to hand over to the UN Deputy Secretary General, Amina Mohammed, for some closing remarks. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone. This has been such a great event today. While you are not able to come in person to the United Nations for the 75th General Assembly, we have brought some of the important discussions about global issues, including the Sustainable Development Goals, to you. Thank you, Their World and the Global Business Coalition for Education for hosting this event, and to Omnicom and UN Common Ground partner for SDG 4 for your ongoing support. If we leave with one message we've heard loud and clear, it is that education is the key to a better future. Education unlocks so many issues that we care about, from climate change and economic recovery to peace, security, health, and well-being. It is great to have tools to help us make the case for education, bringing together the evidence that will allow us to copy, paste, and advocate. We must make the case to reimagine education and inspire action. We have 10 years to reach the Sustainable Development Goals, and the COVID-19 pandemic has forced us even further off track. But the path to recovery can be an opportunity to innovate and rapidly expand education and promote equity. Indeed, some of the actions we've learned about today can transform our societies. Starting with the early years, investing just 10% of education funds to the youngest children on early child learning can rapidly give every child the best start in life. Less than 2% of education budgets are allocated to early child education in low-income countries, so it's not surprising that 4 to 5 children in those countries are denied the springboard of early education. If we want to change this, then we must find ways to increase the figure to 10%, and we need a similar shift in international assistance dedicated to education. Supporting safe, inclusive schools for the most marginalized is similarly promising. The recent tragedies in Lebanon and in the Moira camp in Greece underscore the need to keep education on the agenda for refugee and displaced children. In our rapidly changing world, we need to make sure education is relevant and that we prepare young people with the skills they need for the future of work. And finally, we must prioritize and invest in education if we want to see better returns in society and the economy. Notwithstanding today's financial downturn, It is the time to increase investment in our children. We must sustain and increase domestic and international financing, attract corporate and philanthropic support, and harness new mechanisms like the International Finance Facility for Education to make our funding go further. As advocates, government officials, NGO representatives, youth campaigners, businesses, and philanthropists, and our leaders in our communities, you are perfectly positioned to make the case and take up this challenge. I hope you leave today inspired to speak up and act now for the millions in need of an education and for the next generation. Thank you again for your participation today. Now, let's get the job done.